Garrick, good morning and greetings to the west coast of the United States of America.
Thank you, and greetings to the mountain region of the United States of America.
Well, thank you. Garrick, we're obviously thrilled to be making music, or I'm thrilled, but the audience is thrilled to welcome you back to the Grand Teton Music Festival in 2022. Of course, we started with something of a splash a few years ago with that rather remarkable Saving the Show, the Rachmaninoff 3. You've subsequently been with us with Mozart, and now taking on something, well, many would consider probably the most epic of challenges, doing all the Beethoven concerti over 2 concerts. I have so many questions. I suppose my first question, how do you choose where to put which concerto? What are the criterion there?
There are several, including very pragmatic ones, which is the length of the works involved. Because we don't want to, for example, one could do 3, 4, and 5 as a single concert, but then it's about the length of a symphony concert and a half. So just too much. So that was part of the decision. And then I thought, since the 2 absolutely most popular ones are numbers 4 and 5, those are the, if you will, hits of the whole group. Although they're all hits for me, I thought we shouldn't have the 2 most popular pieces on the same program either. So it was just rather pragmatic. I guess 2 in 1 go and we're just being a little bit didactic and going back to Beethoven's original ordering, because he wrote the so-called second concerto before the first, but it was published second, so it got called number 2. Which, program notes always tell us, and there it is. But hearing things in order with Beethoven is enlightening, but also hearing things out of order. If you're going to accept the premise of 2 concerts for the 5 pieces, you've got to make a decision at some point, don't you?
Absolutely. As a pianist and as this master interpreter of these works, do you feel very much even as I call them a kind of veritable mountain range, all these 5 concerti, that they all stand alone so wonderfully. Do you sense a development through all 5 concerti?
Absolutely. On any number of levels, pianistically, musically, even in terms of historical development, because as is often said, Beethoven changed the course of, well, classical music or European music or whatever you want to call it. I mean, he developed it. It was a language. It was an art form that was developing fast before he was born, and he pushed it and perhaps developed it faster. In other words, he stretched the limits, including of size and scale, and later of even orchestration a little bit. In the more classical time, with one brilliant but naughty exception of Mozart, the 271, which we've done in Jackson Hole, in any concerto or any aria from Bach's time on, the orchestra gives you some material and then the solo voice enters. It's always a point of interest, as Tovey points out, to see what's the soloist going to do. Is he going to reiterate the same material or say something different or vary it? And with Beethoven, for the first 3 concertos, he does exactly that. The pianist listens to the opening tutti, which presents most of the material of the first movement, and then comments on it with unrelated, well, for the first 2 concertos, unrelated material, and with the 3rd concerto, a Beethovenian angry version of the very opening bars of the quiet orchestra opening. But when it comes to the 4th, the favorite moment to talk about, the piano plays 5 bars of the first theme. And then the orchestra answers in a distant key. And to the sophisticated listeners in Vienna, where he premiered this, and they indeed were sophisticated, some of them were his students, his pupils. For those who were very well trained and versed in music, mostly the aristocracy that he worked with, this would have been a great shock, because first of all, what's the piano doing, almost improvising a bit, and then getting the answer in the wrong key from the orchestra. And in those days, that would have been really quite a visceral shock. Whereas, of course, we've had 100 years of music history since the Rite of Spring, so we're no longer so terribly shocked by such things. And in the 5th concerto, as the orchestra is getting more powerful and pianos are getting more powerful, Beethoven always embraced every new development in the piano, because it was an instrument that was being developed during his lifetime. And so in the 5th concerto, he decides the piano is the equal of the orchestra, and the orchestra plays one chord and the piano takes off in a flourish as if to say, don't bother with them, I'm in control here. And at the climax of the development section of the Emperor, there's actually a fight where the orchestra goes bum ba dum, and the piano crashes back bum ba dum. And probably never before in music history had the piano had enough strength to possibly answer all the sound of an orchestra. So it became a kind of a dialectic, and they sort of have a little musical tussle for a while, which then ends peacefully. And because the Fifth Concerto was mostly a very joyous piece. So Beethoven was constantly experimenting with the forms and with the pianism. The pianism of the first two concertos is a little bit beyond what Mozart would have done, but Mozart could have played it if he ever knew them. You know, it would have fit the Mozartian range of Mozart's forte pianos in terms of what you could do. By the third, it's getting a little bit more aggressive, and in the fourth and fifth, even more so. And in the fifth, you probably have the first almost modern proto-romantic concerto with the piano actually using sound and noise and technical things to make color and so on. So yes, there's a tremendous development within it. And I'd like to add just one thing to that, which is, you know, with the symphonies, as you say, of Mahler or Beethoven or Bruckner, there is a sort of steady line of development. Well, by the time Beethoven wrote the Fifth Concerto, he was going very deaf and was not appearing as a virtuoso pianist, which was one of his big roles in life. And so maybe because it wasn't for him to play, or maybe because they didn't commission pieces so much for other people to play than the composer, that he didn't continue. It would be nice to know what he would have done had he written, you know, piano concertos in his late period. What would a piano concerto written alongside the Ninth Symphony sound like?
I should imagine it would have been an epic bun fight. I mean, I'm really looking forward to picking many fights during these concerti. I'm just kidding, Garrick. What is going through your mind? And secondly, are there situations where suddenly at that concert, for whatever reason, it's a slightly different exposition before you come in? Can that have an influence on what you're about to play?
I think the soloist in a Beethoven concerto or a Mozart concerto or any needs to listen to what's going on and be part of it, react to it, react sort of contrary. You know, in the first concerto, after the lovely tutti finishes with a flourish, it's like an actor, how are you going to say that line? Among the hopefully numerous variable possibilities that are legitimate, you know. I'm not going to come in fortissimo in the first concerto because that would be iconoclastic or just stupid. But just the mood of it and the way the orchestra has set it up. Also, there's a question of tempo, because it's possible, even with a superb orchestra and conductor like I will have in Jackson Hole, and I'm saying that not to be complimentary, but just true.
Much appreciated.
You know, we all have our deep musical relationships with Beethoven built over a lifetime. And even if we agree on tempo and character, on a particular day, you might set it up just a hair slower or a hair faster than I might like to play. I mean, this is the very nuts and bolts of playing with colleagues. And, you know, then I sort of have to think, well, what do I do? Because I think it's extremely bad manners, although I've heard distinguished soloists do it sometimes, to come in at the tempo they want. like you know,
I like Glenn Gould.
Sort of, yes. Like, you know, well, enough of that. They're done now. Now let's do it the way I think it should be, because I think these are cooperative pieces. But that won't happen. But nevertheless, it's more subtle. It's more the mood of the moment, and perhaps I might feel the whole thing should be a little bit lively. So I might be let's say that happened. I might be plotting, well, I won't come in more lively, but I'll sort of see how the next few phrases can shape. So I'm sort of thinking ahead, but much more on the pragmatic level. When I was a kid, I was nervous during these tutties because they're long, and I'm usually making a debut and want to make a good impression and hope everybody will like me. You know, the orchestra, the conductor, the manager, the critics, the audience. So, you know, you're often quite nervous. And I remembered when I was about 20, I spoke to Vladimir Ashkenazy about that, because the third concerto has the longest opening tutti maybe it's 3 minutes, but it's a long time for a young person to sit there being nervous about doing well. And 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 he just said, if you're really quite nervous, he said, sing the bass line, not loud enough to be heard, but just put yourself into the music so you're involved in something besides your own ego. And I thought, good advice. Brilliant advice from a colleague who was at that point, well, he's not that much my senior. He's only about 12 years older than me, but in those days we were all young. But I thought, wow, he's a genius. He knows what to do. And it's a marvelous thing too, because if you're just feeling any discomfort or any worries, you know, you're making your debut in London or Berlin or something, you know, you're thinking, okay, this is bigger than me. Let's join the totality rather than just, you know, how well will I make, which mistakes will I make in my opening statement?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think one thing that's absolutely certain, Garrick, I will not be listening out for any bass lines emanating from behind me.
No, one would of course not sing them audibly.
I think you're far more likely to hear groans from me.
You're so musical.
Well, yeah, but it probably doesn't come across that way. Well, Garrick, I treasure our partnership. I treasure you. I treasure the dialogues and even the fights that we're going to have this summer. And stay well. Stay. Your word, my friend. Stay well. Stay healthy until we meet again in the Grand Tetons. Thank you so much, Garrick.
You're so welcome. I look so incredibly much forward to it.